Hello and welcome to another HanDrinksSolo wine info video. And today we head to the warm and sunny region of Franschhoek in order to explore Moreson's Cabernet Franc 2018 vintage. Now, in order to fully understand the house style of Moreson, which is quite a bit riper than, say, the Zorgvliet example that we explored earlier in the month, one needs to actually be able to understand all the components that pop up in the Cabernet Franc flavor spectrum in order to see how they change and morph as one moves along the ripeness scale. Of course, the reason that we love Cabernet Franc so much here at HanDrinksSolo is because the best examples can actually exhibit all of these flavor groups in one wine and still somehow present as harmonious and balanced, even though there are these highly contrasting savory and sweet elements going on. So what are the many faces of Cabernet Franc? And I guess like up front, it would be just a little bit too easy to call Cabernet Franc a sort of Jekyll and Hyde type grape. Mostly too easy because really binary thinking is so last decade. Secondly, because there aren't just two faces, there are many, which is why I prefer to think of it as more of a kind of kryptonite and Superman state of affairs, because you don't just have one type of kryptonite, right? You got green kryptonite, which saps Superman of his powers. You got red kryptonite, which lets him keep his powers, then makes him all aggro, even against his friends. Then you've got white kryptonite, which kills all plants. You got gold kryptonite, which strips you of your memories. And finally, you've got black kryptonite, which of course, as we remember from the 80s, splits people into good and evil versions of themselves. Of course, in our post-truth era, it's very difficult to know who's really good and who's evil. So how would you tell which one is which? I mean, after all, aren't good and evil purely products of the corrupt political system from under which we were raised? But back to Cabernet Franc. What I'm talking about is that as we move along the ripeness scale, we get various characters that pop out. And we're going to talk about those now. So at the very unripe level, in South Africa, that might express itself as a kind of 12% Cabernet Franc, and there are a few of those out there, which are overtly cabbagey with kind of asparagus, almost like you'd smell on a Sauvignon Blanc. And any elements of fruit that are there are usually quite lean, very tart, all about the red berries, high acid, and they can be beautifully aromatic, but generally very angular as well. Then, as you move along the ripeness scale, you get to a point where those savory, weedy vegetable elements actually start to gain a little bit of depth and complexity. And so what might have been green pepper becomes red bell pepper. And perhaps if you're lucky, it takes on a kind of savory, more complex roasted bell pepper element. This wave of red cherry, cranberry, raspberry, tart fruit now starts to shift slightly to show deeper notes of perhaps blueberry or blackcurrant or even blackberry. And in the best examples, you get a kind of mix of the black fruit and the tartar, brighter red fruit. And then if you're really lucky, what will come in this phase is some beautiful elements of violet or even dried flowers as the Cabernet Franc starts to age. So when you move past the middle zone and then get to the end of the spectrum, where now your wine is quite high in alcohol, usually would sit at around 15% and often exhibits almost no vegetable notes. What you'll have is loads and loads of blue fruit, blueberries, plum, blackcurrant, blackberry, all very ripe. In fact, they can take on a kind of confected element where perhaps blackcurrant becomes blackcurrant jam or strawberries become strawberry preserve. And this end section is kind of where Moreson have placed themselves. This is very much the Moreson house style of Cabernet Franc, or at least as far as the 2018 vintage is concerned. In fact, on their website, when talking about their Cabernet Franc, they explicitly state that all green peppers have henceforth been banished. So they're very much living in a post-Pyrazine age. But let's stop talking theory and let's give it a sniff. So as I mentioned, there's quite an interesting strawberry jam element that pops up, and definitely those blackcurrant fruit pastels. Let's give it a sip. So what's really quite nice that you wouldn't get on many bigger, riper styles of Cabernet Franc, especially from a warm region, is that this wine still exhibits some elements of red fruit. So there's actually a kind of a raspberry sherbet going in there, perhaps some cherry candy. And this brightness and clean acidity offsets some of the riper, richer fruit undertones. But as I suspected, there is absolutely zero element of bell pepper or roasted bell pepper as they clearly set out to achieve. And then right on the end, there's quite a lovely little hint of mint, obviously the result of the slightly riper expression, but also leaves a sense of freshness on the finish, which is quite nice. At this point, you might be going, well, Han, give us a serving suggestion. What on earth are we supposed to serve it with? And you'd wait for some insightful response, and which, I mean, sure, serve it with something big and meaty. But actually, My gold medal serving suggestion would be that you pair this Moreson Franc Cabernet Franc with the Zorgfleet, slightly cooler expression from a slightly higher altitude with slightly more herbaceous elements, savory elements going on, because the comparison of these two will teach you far more about the grape of Cabernet Franc than any big meaty dish will. So that is my serving suggestion. Serve this Cabernet Franc with another Cabernet Franc. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the comparison between these two wines, so make sure you leave a review in the section below this video. Or if you're watching this on YouTube, why not subscribe to the HanDrinksSolo channel so that you can keep up to date with the weekly videos that I publish about niche cultivars or not so niche cultivars, as well as rising wine stars and more established wine brands, all of which come together to produce a rather dynamic and exciting scenario here in the South African winelands.